The LinkedIn Podcast Network is sponsored by TIAA. TIAA makes you a retirement promise, a promise of a guaranteed retirement paycheck for life. Learn more at TIAA.org/promises pay off.
LinkedIn presents. Nearly all C-suite women, 94%, share a stunning commonality. They played sports. In sports, we learn to physically overcome by sheer grit, Lindsey Vonn told me. It's one of the only places you can learn that skill, where you can fail safely, train harder, learn to persist. Most of the time, Vonn says, the most successful people aren't the people with the most talent or the most skill. They are the people that refuse to give up and will outwork everybody.
Hi, I'm Michael Kovnat, and this is the Next Big Idea Daily, the show that gives you quick insights from the latest nonfiction books straight from the authors themselves. Just make sure you click subscribe to get our future episodes and sign up for one of our newsletters using the link in the episode notes. If you get something out of today's show, do me a favor and leave a rating or review on your podcast player to help others find it. At this year's Summer Olympics, did you catch Katie Ledecky's record-breaking swim? How about Simone Biles leading the U.S. gymnastics squad to yet another gold medal? Well, let's take a moment to reflect on the fact that women like these were never intended to be part of the Olympics. No women were. According to the founding organizer of the modern games, Pierre de Coubertin, women have but one task, that of the role of crowning the winner with garlands. In public competitions, women's participation must be absolutely prohibited. It is indecent that spectators would be exposed to the risk of seeing the body of a woman being smashed before their eyes. Well, we've been taking that risk and handling it just fine, thank you, more and more lately, as the rise of women in athletics is undeniable, and it's changing the face of sports, culture, and the economy. Joining us to talk us through some of these changes is Macaela MacKenzie, author of the book Money, Power, Respect: How Women in Sports Are Shaping the Future of Feminism. Macaela is a journalist and a former senior editor at Glamour magazine. Her work has also been featured in Elle, Bustle, Self, Marie Claire, and Women's Health, among many other publications. Here she is to share 5 of her big ideas.
One of the first things I learned when I started profiling women athletes was that you don't have to be a diehard sports fan to understand the value of women's sports. Both as a business and a pillar of our culture, sport tells us a lot about the way a given society values women. Take the Olympics, for example. When the modern games began in 1896, women were not allowed to compete because it would be, quote, impractical, uninteresting, unaesthetic, and indecent, according to the founder of the International Olympic Committee. As he saw it, the greatest sporting stage in the world was about showcasing male excellence, with, quote, female applause as a reward. Women have since made huge strides into these male-dominated arenas. At the Tokyo Olympics in 2021, U.S. women handily outperformed their male counterparts, bringing home 60% of the country's total medal haul. But they're routinely met with the same sexist attitudes, and often literally forced to play by a different set of rules. When the Women's World Cup started in 1991, for example, the matches were 80 minutes instead of the men's regulation 90, because organizers were afraid the women athletes couldn't handle another 10 minutes of exertion. It wasn't until the most recent Summer Games in Tokyo that women were allowed to swim the 1,500 meters, which for years was thought to be too grueling for women to undertake. Katie Ledecky, for the record, dominated at the inaugural race. The way we talk about women in sports matters. Lindsey Vonn is one of the greatest athletes in history. She won 82 World Cup titles, making her the winningest woman to ever strap on skis during her career. Her record was recently broken by Mikaela Shiffrin, who clinched her 88th World Cup victory in 2023, becoming the most decorated skier, male or female, in history. But throughout Vonn's career, media coverage of her was often dominated by comments about her looks, debates about her body, and even outright claims that all her success was due to her ex-husband, who was her coach while they were married. An article published by Bleacher Report declared that Vaughn's impending divorce would, quote, ruin her career. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Even more insidious is the way the media tends to sexualize women in sport. This kind of coverage of female athletes devalues women. Research shows that women athletes presented in a sexualized way are taken less seriously, which ultimately harms them at the negotiating table. And it doesn't stop in sports. One analysis, published in the prestigious journal PLOS One in 2019, found that sexualized women are viewed as lacking in both mental and moral capacity. As a result, they are seen as less competent and less human, the study read. This is why it's so exciting and encouraging to see women in sports taking control of their own narratives and taking ownership of their own images. Teamwork is everything, especially off the court. If there's one thing to know about women athletes, it's this. They get things done, from historic equal pay deals to influencing elections to the successful negotiation of labor contracts that can be used as a model for paid leave in other industries. Women athletes have accomplished some of the most important social justice work in modern history. The not-so-secret secret behind these wins? Women in sports know how to organize. From Billie Jean King and the Original Nine banding together in the 1970s to launch the first women's tennis tour, laying the foundations for Naomi Osaka and Serena Williams to become the highest-paid women in sports, to the women of the U.S. women's national hockey team standing together to fight for equal pay, women athletes have given us some of the best examples of collective bargaining in history. One of my favorite stories is that of the U.S. women's national hockey team. When negotiations between players and USA Hockey over a living wage broke down in 2017, the Federation tried to replace the senior team with more junior players, reaching out to college and even high school athletes to undermine the professionals who dared to ask for fair pay. In a stunning show of solidarity, the junior players turned them down. This was the pinnacle of our sport, Kendall Coyne-Schofield, U.S. women's national hockey team captain, told me. For some players, this was their first opportunity to play for Team USA, and could have been their last. Women athletes have used collective power not just to help themselves, but to champion social justice causes. Take the women of the WNBA, the goats of collective action. When Atlanta Dream owner and then U.S. Senator Kelly Loeffler wrote an open letter condemning the WNBA's support of Black Lives Matter in 2020, the entire league banded together to support her opponent, Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock, in the upcoming election. He won the seat, in an underdog upset credited largely by political analysts to the women of the W. If women in sports tell us anything, it's to never underestimate the power of the collective voice. Women make stronger leaders. The numbers don't lie. Companies with more women in executive positions and on boards make more money. Research shows that the presence of women in leadership roles leads to increased profits, revenue growth, and share price. One analysis found that during the economic turmoil of the pandemic, companies with the highest gender diversity had a combined income growth of $58 billion, while companies with lower gender diversity saw a combined loss of $283 billion. Having more women in leadership positions won't magically solve all the world's problems, but there is evidence that it can meaningfully narrow the gender gap. When women have access to power, they're more likely to share it. Investor Cindy Eckert calls it underdog unification. It's my experience that most people who have played the game on an uneven playing field and managed to succeed become highly motivated to turn around and level it, she says. This is one of the most important reasons to support women's sports, which serve as an undeniable leadership pipeline. Nearly all C-suite women, 94%, share a stunning commonality. They played sports. In sports, we learn to physically overcome by sheer grit, Lindsey Vonn told me. It's one of the only places you can learn that skill, where you can fail safely, train harder, learn to persist. Most of the time, Vonn says, the most successful people aren't the people with the most talent or the most skill. They are the people that refuse to give up and will outwork everybody. Women's sports are good business. The fight for gender equity in sports is ultimately an investment issue. Those who oppose equal pay for women in sports argue that women shouldn't make as much money because they don't generate as much revenue. In many cases, they're right. They're just not telling the whole story. In 2021, the college basketball tournament turned cultural sensation known as March Madness made headlines for all the wrong reasons. While players on men's teams were given luxurious amenities at their tournament bubble, the experience at the women's bubble was embarrassingly cheap. Nowhere was this more obvious than in the weight room for each tournament. While the men enjoyed an expansive hotel ballroom decked out with state-of-the-art equipment, a photo of the women's weight room, which consisted of a single rack of dumbbells and some yoga mats, went viral. Weightgate is emblematic of the investment problem in women's sports, and a particularly apt metaphor. If you take two otherwise equally qualified athletes and give one access to a state-of-the-art training facility, the best nutrition and performance coaches, and every recovery tool on the market, you could logically expect to see a better output than the athlete given scarcely more than a set of 10-pound weights. Across the board, the investment gap in sports is huge. Women's sports are given meager resources and opportunities to grow, and then judged against standards set by an industry which has benefited from decades of growth and billions in investment. An independent report commissioned after the March Madness debacle of 2021 unearthed a profound truth about the investment gap in sports. Bias often prevents investment in women, even when it means leaving money on the table. For years, the women's college basketball tournament was blocked from using the lucrative March Madness moniker, a move that would have cost organizers nothing, while helping to grow the women's audience and ultimately increase the NCAA's profits. The independent report found that the NCAA was potentially leaving $100 million in revenue on the table simply by treating the women's game as a second-class product. The 2022 tournament proved to be a useful case study for what happens when you invest in women's sports. Women's basketball was finally brought under the lucrative March Madness branding, and ESPN aired all women's Final Four and championship games across all its networks. The results were historic: triple-digit viewership gains, a sold-out championship game, and millions of dollars in earned social media value. Invest in women, see real results.
All right, thank you, Macaela. Well, that's our show. I hope you catch some more of the Olympics today. I think the women's 3-meter springboard diving competition is on the schedule today, and you don't want to miss that. I'm Michael Kovnat. I'll see you tomorrow.